Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you here with us. Today's discussion or our webinar today is on farm safety for youth, keeping the next generation safe. My name is Salah Issa. I'm an assistant professor and extension specialist here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. We have a great guest speaker with us today, Jana Davidson, program manager at Progressive Agriculture Foundation, and we're really excited for this talk with you. We have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to keep going. Our objectives today is discuss why young people are uniquely vulnerable to farm hazards. And through that discussion, we'll talk about top hazards, statistics associated with these agricultural injuries, and I'll actually give a special case study focused on grain entrapments as well. Then we're going to kind of move the topic along and focus on effective ways to train young workers and ensure safe behaviors. And lastly, we'll look at some of the child labor laws and resources that govern this space as well. We have, as I mentioned earlier, a great guest speaker, Jana Davidson. She's a program manager at Progressive Agriculture Foundation. She joined PAF 10 years ago. PAF is the Progressive Ag Foundation. And as a program manager, she's been overseeing the day-to-day and long-range program operations for it. At the same time, she's also a coordinator at her local community for the Progressive Ag Foundation Safety Days, where she hosts children, families, and communities to learn about how to stay safe in an agricultural setting. I'm going to turn it over to Jana, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Dr. Issa. I appreciate it. As he just mentioned, I am gearing up for my local safety day that I offer here in my community. This will be year number 18 of hosting for elementary school age youth to try to teach them ways to make safer and healthier choices, whether they're living on the farm or just throughout the rural community. So I think we're going to kick things off here by just taking a look at the numbers. So to go through these a little bit, as you can see here, about 22 million people are employed in an agriculture-related field. There are 2 million farms currently in the United States. One thing to note about the farms, the number of large farms are increasing. We're also seeing an increase in lifestyle farms, and we're also seeing an increase in agritourism. So those are definitely on the rise. However, a lot of our small to mid-sized farms are decreasing. So just something to note there. Just a little less than 900,000 children or youth live on farms, and more than half of these youth work on the farm. So that's just a little over 51% there. An additional 265,000 or more youth are hired to work on farms, and an estimated 25 million youth visit farms. So this may be visiting a farm that's, a family farm, a friend's farm. I mentioned agritourism. I noticed, a lot of times in the schools, they'll do, a special ag days where youth will visit the farm. So we have more children that live on farms that are actually visiting. And then also just to mention the diverse population. So we have groups like Hispanic, Anabaptist, African American, Native American populations that are living, working, and farming. And, it's important, in our jobs here working with farm safety and health, we always need to remember, and keep in mind the messaging, because we want to be inclusive to these populations and educate them, go sometimes and meet them halfway to where they are, so we can give them the important tools that they need and resources. But we also know that these individuals sometimes have limited access to resources living in rural communities. So maybe that's limitations to healthcare, broadband internet, sometimes isolation. So we always need to keep in mind all of the different audiences when we are wanting to educate about ag safety and health. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about working youth. So this kind of shows you I guess, the fatality rates in agriculture versus all other industries. So as you can see, agriculture, as you know, as we say it all the time, it is a very dangerous, very hazardous, but very much needed job that individuals do. So if you look at, the statistics here, the positive news is from 2001 to 2016. The fatalities are starting to go down from where they was very high there in 2010. But in 2016, just one thing to note, young workers in agriculture were 7.8 times more likely to be fatally injured in agriculture compared to all other industries combined. So, that just shows you again how dangerous agriculture can be. So, that's why we are here talking with all of you today. This next slide here, it shares a few more statistics for you. So every day, about 33 children are injured in agriculture related incidents. One thing I will mention though, I know a lot of this presentation, it's going to feel like a little doom and gloom when we're sharing these statistics and we're talking about the dangers of agriculture. The positive news is back when I started with Progressive Agriculture Foundation in 2014, that number was 38. So 38 children were being injured annually. So it is nice to see that that was on the decline, but we also have to ask ourselves, what do we know? What's not being reported, or what don't we know that's happening as far as injuries? As far as where these injuries are coming from, or the incidents are coming from, vehicles make up the leading cause of injury among working youth. And also livestock are the leading cause of injury for non-working youth. So a couple statistics that the National Children's Center for Rural and Agriculture Health and Safety, they're out of Marshfield Clinic. They put out a lot of research, a lot of statistics of the leading fatalities for youth in agriculture. 47% involve transportation. So that's our tractors, that's our ATVs, that's our UTVs. That is probably, in the 10 years that I have been with Progressive Ag, that has been the number one incident I see occurring, or when I see the news clippings, it seems to be a lot related to ATV, UTV incidents. So 47% involved transportation, 20% involved contact with machinery, and then 13% involved a violent contact with animals, and sometimes even other humans. So what that may mean is that, if you have someone, maybe it's an adult that's working and they're on a ladder, a child is below them, they fall off that ladder, they might fall and fatally injure that young child. So that's what that means about the violent contact with livestock and other humans. So that just kind of shows you what's going on there. The good news, again, with the trend with the younger children, we were seeing that is declining a bit. So again, maybe more parents are, starting to realize that it is dangerous, and maybe start evaluating their child's abilities based on the task at hand. Here's a few other things that we know. We have about 104 deaths in agriculture annually. The emergency department visits account for about 22,000 get treated in our hospital emergency rooms, but there's about 78,000 injuries that are not treated in hospitals or emergency departments. So that's something that's not being always accounted for, but it just shows you that this is an incident. This is a major concern. And the other thing too is, with coding, sometimes incidents and injuries that come into the hospital, sometimes they aren't always connected or show the connection to the farm or the agriculture incident. Maybe it's just reported as a fall off a ladder, but maybe it was actually in the barn, or some things that it could be reported more into an agriculture related incident. So we're going to look at now kind of the top 5 injury statistics. And again, these come from the National Children's Center that I mentioned earlier. We've mentioned already that agriculture, it is the most hazardous, one of the nation's most hazardous, and that this is for children of any age, and I would say even adults of any age. So one thing we do know is that a child dies in agriculture every 3 days. So that is just a huge statistics. We've talked about the everyday 33 children are seriously injured in agriculture. Another thing to talk about here is the number of ag-related youth worker fatalities is higher than all other industries combined, which we just mentioned, and we looked at that graph. This next one is really eye-opening. 60% of child ag-related injuries happen to children who are not working. So this was something, you know, when I again started in this position, I had assumed that most of the injuries happening on farms were children that were working. And we know that that happens, but 60% of children are not working when the injury occurs. So again, sometimes they're in areas where they shouldn't be, blind spots. We see that happen a lot where, you know, that operator of that equipment does not see that child. That child thinks because they see the operator sees them when that's not the case. Or they're just, again, in a situation with livestock or other machinery that they just shouldn't be. So that's a big statistic there. And then lastly, many in agricultural work-related injuries and deaths are associated with children doing work that does not match their developmental level. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, and we'll also share some resources here towards the end of places that you can look to really identify, is your child ready for that task, and really be able to evaluate. Next, we're going to talk about the top 3 causes of injuries and fatalities. So when we look at our fatal injuries, we talked about this a lot in machinery, the motor vehicles, but one thing we failed to mention yet is drowning. That's a popular one, even outside of agriculture. If you look at just the general injuries and fatalities for children, drowning is up there as well. So that's something that we really need to consider, especially if we have farms where we have open water, we have ponds, we have other areas of water. We need to make sure that we are protecting our children from those areas. And then for non-fatal, we see a lot of falls. We see this a lot, especially with fall harvest coming up. And again, then when spring planting rolls around, there's a lot of rushing to complete a lot of tasks in a short amount of time. And so sometimes we become a little complacent, and that's when we see incidents like falls happen. Again, we've mentioned the livestock, and then again, machinery and vehicles. I think we're going to continue to see that again with the popularity of things like our ATVs and our UTVs. And we always say at the Progressive Ag Foundation, and I think you'll all agree, you know, when a child is severely injured or a child dies in an agriculture or in a rural community, I mean, the whole community suffers. It's not just that child, it's not just their family, it's the entire community. You can see that economic impact, which is nearly $1.26 billion. However, you know, that loss of that child is going to be felt for not just weeks or months, but sometimes years and forever. And the other thing that it also can affect is just that mental well-being of some of the family members. We have heard a lot of incidents where maybe it was a sibling of, you know, that was injured, and that brother, that sister maybe witnessed it, or maybe caused the incident in some way, and they are having to live with that the rest of their lives. And we're seeing that takes a dramatic toll on them, both physically and mentally. So that's really important to consider. All right, the other thing to keep in mind too is it's not just the injuries that we need to be thinking about, but there's also other illness and health issues. So obviously COVID for the last 4 years, that has been something that has been very, very much on all of our minds. And then there's zoonotic diseases. So we need to keep those things always at the forefront, and also be careful too with any of our making sure we're not transferring anything from farms to farm if we're doing any visits that way. There's also, hearing and vibration. So when you are working in agriculture, that constant exposure to loud noises, to the vibration of the tractor, I mean, that can have health effects and, long into your adult life. And if they start as a youth, it can become detrimental a lot earlier than most. So we need to be utilizing things like PPE as much as we can, the personal protective equipment. Then exposure to dust and molds, again, a way that we can help combat that is, again, by wearing things like dust masks and other important PPE. Mental health is also a hot topic now. We're especially seeing this in our farming and rural communities. Again, with that, the less access that they have to sometimes important resources that sometimes others in, cities and other areas have more access to. That could be an issue. And then, our farming communities or our farmers, they don't always get the opportunity to leave the farm. Sometimes if we're having a bad day, we can go and then maybe escape or get outside the house or do something, that issue that's concerning them is just, they have trouble walking away from it. And they're always dealing with something new, whether it's commodity prices or the weather, or, machinery breaking down. There's just always something, and that can also really lead to a mental illness. And then other hazards. So of course, exposure to the sun, making sure, again, there's always PPE that you can be using, from, wide brim hats, and making sure you're wearing sunscreen with SPF and sunglasses. But, you have constant other exposures that you just need to be aware of, and make sure that you're keeping that at the forefront too in all that you do. Next, we're going to talk about a really great resource that both Salah and I have utilized in the past. When we were chatting earlier this week, I mentioned that with this ag injury news, I actually subscribe. So I get weekly reports of any incidents involving children under the age of 18. So it's really an opportunity to keep this at the forefront, to keep this in front of my colleagues and the staff that I work with, and just make sure that we have a pulse on what's happening and where we're seeing the incidents, or the most incidents happening. And like I said, every week there is usually always a mention of an ATV or UTV incident in my list that I get. But this is a free service. You're seeing some examples here. It pulls in articles, news reports that are specific to incidents that are happening on our farm. So maybe you're listening in and you need to make a case for bringing some new safety and health related education to a local community. And some folks are just not wanting to listen to you. And they're like, there's not a problem here. You can actually go to Ag Injury News and do some of your own research and be able to kind of highlight and bring about, hey, yes, there is a problem. This is what's taking place in our region, in our state. So I do highly encourage you to check this out. Again, it's a free resource, again, through Marshfield Clinic. And it's just amazing that you're really able to keep a pulse on what is happening in the ag world as far as incidents and fatalities. A few other things here, talking just a little bit about youth working in agriculture. And again, I think I mentioned we will talk a little bit more about some of these resources that can help you a little later on. But things that you do want to consider is, if you're able to work at younger ages, this working in agriculture is definitely, as we said, a more hazardous job. We have to keep in mind that our children have developing bodies. So I have two daughters now at 18 and 15. And, I know that they've went through periods where their coordination, their balance was off as they were starting to grow into their bodies. So we need to make sure we're considering that before we're assigning some of the tasks. Also, their brains are developing. So they have shorter attention spans. Sometimes they're challenged with impulse control, and they're also just starting to learn to make some decisions for themselves. So, we need to keep that in mind too when we're assigning tasks. They also can struggle with fatigue. They need more sleep sometimes than us as adults. So we need to keep that in mind. So if we have them doing tasks where they're working longer hours, we need to make sure we're taking the time to add in breaks and make sure that they're taking care of themselves. And then there's also those distractive behaviors. Growing up, we did not have cell phones and TikTok and social media and all the different things that our children have now right at their fingertips. So, sometimes they get glued to those phones. And so when they're doing sometimes work in agriculture, that can be a huge distraction and can not only be detrimental to harming themselves, but also harming others that they may not be aware of. So these are just definitely things that we want to take into account. And then other teen characteristics that might affect safety, obviously impulsive behaviors. They sometimes have risk-taking attitudes, and maybe this isn't for just all farm-related children, but you have to think that they are sometimes bringing friends to the farm. They are also bringing sometimes relatives are visiting the farm that don't live on the farm. And to them, sometimes it's a huge playground or huge opportunity. They see the animals and they see the equipment. And, it again can lead to some risk-taking attitudes and behaviors, and that's when incidents can occur. We also have children that have a desire to prove themselves. I think we've all been there where we want, our families to be proud of us and watch us taking responsibilities. And that also goes to sometimes that reluctancy to want to ask questions on how to do something. Sometimes, as teens, they think that they know it all and they'll be able to figure it out, when sometimes they do need to either ask questions or ask for help. And then also we have peer pressure, that's just always a daily occurrence. And then the lack of experience, that can also lead to incidents. If children are not used to doing a certain task and then we ask them to do it, we can't just go back to, well, when I was their age, I was able to do it. We need to make sure that the task fits their age, their developmental abilities, and also that they understand that task at hand.
Thank you very much, Jana, so far. I'm going to interrupt you to talk about this case study. So I really appreciate what you've presented so far. You've looked at, in a sense, why are we looking at teen and youth, what kind of risky behaviors we see, and so on. And so I did this quick grain entrapment case study to kind of bring some of that discussion points that Jana brought up into the forefront. I'll start with a quick set of definitions to make sure we're all on the same level. I appreciate everybody's patience with me. So grain engulfment, it's anytime a person is buried in grain to the point they can't breathe. Their nostrils are and their mouth is under that grain mass. While a grain entrapment is anybody who is stuck in a grain mass. We use this term either specifically in contrast to engulfment, where grain entrapment, your airways you can breathe and they're not covered by grain, or we use this term generically, grain entrapment, to refer either entrapment or engulfment. For the most part, I'm just going to use the word grain entrapments, and it kind of represents both cases. Another thing to let you know is that a lot of these grain entrapments, there's one of the main causes for them is what we call a flowing grain entrapment. So that occurs when you have an individual inside a grain mass. And as they're inside the grain mass, the auger at the very bottom of the grain bin, so you see where there's like a small tunnel that's pulling out grain, it starts operating and it just pulls the person straight in. And it doesn't take more than 20 some seconds for that person to be entrapped in grain. So grain entrapment has been a consistent problem here in the US. Every year we have 20 to 40 grain entrapments. Each of these cases, historically on average, around 70% are fatal. More recently, we're seeing around 50% fatal. So now let me bring this back into our topic, which is, safety for youth. So one very famous incident occurred here in Illinois in Mount Carroll. We had four boys, ages 14, 19, and 20. They were all sent in to remove crusted grain in a grain bin. So what happened there is that you had this huge grain bin, and there's a form of crust that forms on top due to moisture. And the idea is that by sending young workers, they can either walk on the grain, use shovels to break all these clumps before that clumps go all the way down to the outlet. Because once it reaches the outlet, it's kind of like a sink drain. It's pretty easy to clog it. And once it gets clogged, it's really hard to unclog it. So these young boys, some of them were only on the job for a week, and they were all sent into this great big grain bin to break up all the clumps before it reaches the outlet. And as they were doing that, one person, he in a sense blacked out or fainted and ended up getting too close to the center, and he got sucked in. Two other boys went to help him, while the fourth one went outside to call for rescue. And the two other boys that helped them, they both also got entrapped, and one of those two got engulfed as well. So this ended up being a 6-hour rescue attempt to rescue that third person. They had to cut the grain bin on the sides to get them, and only one out of the three was rescued. The other two passed away. It was a huge case here in Illinois. It led to 16 million being awarded to the families and led the formation of the Grain Handling Safety Coalition, of which the University of Illinois was a founding member of. And this really resonates to a lot of the things to talk about. These young men, when you see grain flowing, they don't understand that risk, or they don't understand the hazard. When one person was basically being sucked in, the other two went and jumped in to try to rescue him without thinking much that they themselves will not be able to push against the grain mass. And this is something that we see very frequently in youth entrapments. So over a 60-year period, we've documented over 1,200 cases. This is from Purdue University. These cases, they're the ones who've been documenting them. And out of the 1,000 plus cases, around 30%, 28% were youth, where the age is known. There is around 200 something cases where the age is not known. So that's a significant number of incidents that are occurring to youth under the age of 20. And the majority of these incidents occurring to youth are fatal. And the youngest case that we have is actually all the way under 2 years old. So this is just highlights the age groups from 1 to 20. When we look at it specifically by age for grain entrapments, we have as young of age as 2. Now, a big question in your mind occurs, well, that 2-year-old shouldn't be there working. And yeah, they weren't. They were there playing when they drowned. And that's really, again, highlights another point that Jana brought in, that 60% of the incidents are not just work related. And we see that similarly here with grain entrapments. A lot of times, if you look at this chart here, you can see in the green, these are entrapments that occurred on farms versus in the brownish color where they happened at a commercial facility to the best of our knowledge. You can see the vast majority of the incidents under the age of 16 are occurring on farms, and then it rapidly switches as our young boys and girls mature and become adults. Another important thing to say is, again, a lot of this associated with playing. So we had, for example, in Indiana, we had a 4th grader who was playing with a pile of cornmeal, and that 10-foot pile collapsed on him. We have another case where they were playing with cotton seeds. Cotton seeds is kind of very fun to play with because it kind of maintains its structural integrity a tiny bit. So you can build tunnels and have command posts underneath the grain pile, and then it collapses suddenly, and we see suffocations from there as well. A lot of the vast majority of these incidents occur to males. When they occur to females, the vast majority is young females under the age of 20. So that chart kind of shows you that comparison overall, since it's mostly male versus female in particular. We still see these cases. This is slightly older. This is getting close to being about 10-year-olds case, but this occurs up in Canada, where we had 3 young girls, age 11 and 13. They were placed on a grain wagon. Their father places them on the grain wagon when he went to basically empty his canola seeds. They ended up getting sucked in and drowning in the canola. And all 3 young girls end up passing away. And that's another kind of source that we see is injuries and deaths related to grain wagons and grain transport vehicles. And we see the vast majority is occurring to basically to youth under the age of 20. And it's fairly fatal. And that is luckily, actually, on a positive side, we don't see these incidents as frequently as we used to see them in the past. They do occur, but they kind of peaked in around the 1990s as well. So just a sense of distribution, looking at all the cases we have, under the age of 10, around over half of them occurred to grain transport vehicles, and the vast majority of those was because they were playing either with their parents or independently of their parents. And then as they age up, we see now the vast majority occur in grain bins and silos, and that's a mixture. Sometimes it is because they're playing in the piles of grain. Other times it is because they were working and trying to clear out clumps, or they're sent into the grain bins because they're smaller, they're easy to fit in, and a lot of various reasons as well. If you look at it by month, the vast majority occur during harvest, October and November. And we don't have a lot of documentation as well, but this is something that I've noted. When I looked at the actual adults, there was no significant difference in any of the months. They always had incidents. And we have a paper there published on that you could access to read it. It's a pretty nice paper. If you look at it in terms of our different age groups, you could see from the 60s to really the 1990s, we used to have a lot of incidents, ages 1 to 5. And now that slowly shifted, and now we see more 16 to 20-year-olds getting injured in grain bins. So this is the same chart, but instead of showing you total numbers, I just did it as a percentage. So you can see each age group what percent it represents. So now currently around 50% of the cases is youth age 16 to 20, and around 30% is 10 to 15, and then the last is 5 to 10, represents around approximately 20%. So I'm going to turn it back to Jana, because it's not all bad or scary news.
No, I agree, Stella. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about some of the positive things and the advantages of growing up on a farm. One thing, though, I will just kind of add to when we're talking about grain, and you're going to hear me probably mention this again about, making sure we're sending the correct message to children. So one thing here at the Progressive Agriculture Foundation with our Safety Day programming, which is aimed towards elementary school children, our goal is always to tell the children that grain is no place to play. We are not going to show them at a safety day how to successfully enter a grain bin and what PPE to use. Our message is for them to stay out of it. And just the one thing, as we're getting busy in the farm show season, and as I mentioned, agritourism is so big, and we'll be we'll be seeing a lot of things coming up here with the fall season, a lot of fall harvest agritourism sites. I cringe when I see grain boxes. So those are sand boxes where the sand has been replaced by grain for the children to play in. Again, it may seem harmless, but things like that sometimes sends the wrong message to our children. We're telling them that don't play in grain, but then they're able to in those situations. So I highly encourage you, if that's something that you're doing already, or if you see it happening, have just maybe that respectful conversation with that person as to maybe why it's not the most appropriate. So switching back to gears about the advantages of growing up on a farm. I mean, there is no better way to gain passion for agriculture or instill that passion, that love, that respect for the land and the ag industry than if you grow up on a farm. And, I grew up on a kind of a small hobby farm, and it did teach me many life lessons that, I still value and use to this day. So everything from responsibility and work ethic, there's a lot of children, they're getting up very early to complete some tasks. The school year now approaching, they're going to have things that they need to accomplish before they leave and get on the school bus, as well as things that they're going to do as soon as they step off the school bus. And then also have to balance things like their other activities and their homework and things like that. It gives them independence. It definitely helps them develop important skills, initiative, problem solving. And then there's also just that bond with your family and friends when you're working together to complete a task and have a project. It's a team effort. It's all hands on deck. And so, you celebrate the victories and the little things together. And, when there's hard times, you also experience that all together. You understand life and food cycles. Children that grow up on the farm, they know where their food comes from. They know it just doesn't come from the grocery store. They know that life cycle and what goes into bringing that food to their table every night. And then also there's some protection, when you look at health specific things, there's protection from atopic asthma. And then, that's not really my area of expertise, but again, some of those different things that they're exposed to can actually, have some positive health benefits. Now we're going to kind of talk about how we can make farms safer. So what you're looking at right now, this is the hierarchy of controls. This is something that NIOSH defines for us. And it really talks to us about how we can, again, just make things a little safer. So we start with the most important thing there at the top, and that's elimination. So if we physically remove the hazard, that can lead to making things safer. Substitution. So if we replace the hazard, that also can help and lead to more safe and healthy behaviors on the farm. Engineering control. So this is when we sometimes isolate individuals from the hazard. So what can we do? And we see this. We see, machinery, things like that. They're being tractors. They're being made safer. They're being, safety is in mind at all the levels now when new innovations are being made. There's even things talking about grain. I know that there's, new technology where you don't even have to go into the grain bin to be able to see and know what's going on. So definitely a lot coming up with technology, which is wonderful. But again, that also we still need to keep safety at the forefront. Administrative control. So this is when we change the way that people work. And then last but certainly not least, personal protective equipment. This is making sure that we are protecting the worker. So again, as you kind of look from the top at elimination, that is the most effective to the least effective way that we can help make farms safer. We've mentioned a few times Marshfield Clinic, Cultivate Safety, the National Children's Center, the National Farm Medicine Center. There's a lot going on there in Marshfield, Wisconsin to really, again, keep safety at the forefront, especially for our youth. So, there are some free resources. There's posters that you can get. The first one just kind of talked about some eliminations. This is one of my favorites. Is it's easier to bury a tradition than a child. So again, we need to kind of change that mindset of, when I was a child, I did this and survived. That's not always the case. We're sometimes the lucky ones. We don't want to have that gamble with our children. So this just reminds us, like, let's make quality time, good time with us. It doesn't have to be there on the farm. And I just, recently here in June, I went to the International Society for Agriculture Safety and Health Conference. And I was in a presentation talking about kind of lawnmower safety specifically, and even a little bit about tractors. And it's amazing that young children that, with lawnmowers, we're seeing young children specifically. That's a big reason that they're injured. And children are not, when they hear loud noises, that often scares them. However, when they hear the lawnmower or the tractor, that, gives them that feeling of, riding with mom or dad or grandpa. And so that also creates a dangerous situation of them wanting to, again, go hear that noise. And then sometimes they're not seen. They're in those blind spots, and that can lead to an incident. So again, there's these resources about quality time. And then there's also resources that talk about the size comparison. So your 75-pound child has no chance against a 10,000-pound tractor. So again, free resources here. They're great to hang wherever you see appropriate. I know sometimes they're in doctor's offices in our rural communities. These would be great to add to the farm, is just those reminders. Sometimes we need those daily reminders to keep safety at the forefront. And these can definitely do that. There's also elimination. Things that we have to think about too is around childcare. So we know that when you're growing up on a farm, you don't sometimes have, mom is right there working along with the rest of the family. So we need to always make sure that those children are being taken care of and being safe when the workplace is a very busy, active area. So one thing that we always talk about is creating safe play areas. So we want to make sure that that line between the farm as a home and a workplace can be a little bit more clear, because sometimes it is blurred. So you want to create safe play areas where maybe they're fenced off, the ground is covered, there's supervision, so kids can be easily watched, there's age appropriate equipment, and there's resources to help you in completing this. So we're not just telling you, okay, go ahead and put this together. Again, the Marshfield Clinic has put out some great resources and one booklet on how to create a safe play area and directions on how to do so. So again, really important things to, again, keep our children safe. And again, just a reminder that sometimes, we might instill these safe practices in our children the whole time they're growing up. But when we have visitors to the farm, or maybe, our family and friends are coming in to help during spring planting or fall harvest, it's really important to remember we distinguish the home from the farm. Another thing we want to talk about is around administrative, ensuring age and ability appropriate work. So other resources that, again, are available free through Marshfield Clinic are youth ag worker guidelines. And they're through Cultivate Safety website, which we'll show you where that is here in a few minutes. But this really helps you to ensure that we're assigning tasks that match the worker's ability. So it really walks you through as to, can a youth do the job safely? What's the adult responsibility? What kind of supervision is needed on the different ages? and really walks you through everything from what could be the potential hazards to what could be the protective strategies that we want to have in place. So what's the PPE that is needed for that? So these are all available, and I mean there's several. It really touches on so many different tasks, from operating a tractor to handling livestock. So pretty much when you're looking at the task at hand, you can find it. So you can go to the cultivatingsafety.org website, and you can find them right here. Again, it's Ag Youth Worker Guidelines, and they are really great resources to really help you decide, is my child ready for this task, and what are some of the considerations that I need to keep in mind. Also, just a few things, other things to consider before assigning work. You want to assess the worker's ability to perform the task, regardless of their age. Just because, just because they seem like they're age appropriate based on the guidelines, what about their maturity level? You need to keep that in mind. Assessment also includes just their physical and cognitive abilities, their experience with similar tasks, and then also successful demonstration of current tasks, that they've been able to do it and do it over and over again successfully under supervision. Also, supervisors must provide training. I really encourage that annually too, especially if activity is occurring maybe only in the summer months or only during busy times, and it's only being done once or twice a year. It is really important to remind them of how it should be done, the safety protocols. We can't just always assume, oh, they'll remember that from the last time they did it. We need to keep that at the forefront. And also just make sure we're enforcing policies. If we have rules in place, we need to make sure we're enforcing them and there's consequences to those actions. Again, just more on the Ag Youth Worker Guidelines. They can be used by supervisors, by parents. It really just helps you assign the tasks based on their ability. They are available in 3 languages, which is nice too. So if you're looking for materials that are available for different audiences that you're working for, these fit the bill. And then also they're mobile friendly on the website, and they're very interactive. I believe there's sometimes quizzes and other things that go along with them to really, that the child can participate in as well. You can download them, you can print them. So I do highly encourage you to check these out. So, and there's just, again, another example of, how you can assess the ability to perform a work task, kind of just a closer look at what some of those pieces look like. Here, yeah, we can kind of go through this here quickly, but here you can see ensuring the environment is safe as possible. Again, making sure we're eliminating those distractions and any safety or health related issues beforehand. That's really what we need. We talked about this in the hierarchy. Using that personal protective equipment is very important. And then, as you can see here, there's so many other resources here from Cultivate Safety. So we mentioned that Ag Injury News earlier. You can read more about that here. If you are involved with any type of agritourism, there's resources to keep that safe. We talked about the, creating safe play areas. This is really where you can find all of that. And then also great video resources as well. I'm a visual learner. I love to see videos, so I appreciate that they have resources there that really talk to you, and fact sheets about things like bending safely and lifting safely and climbing safely. When we're on our ladder, making sure we have those 3 points of contact and things like that. And now I'll just take just a few minutes to quickly talk about my program, to give Salah some time to wrap up and talk a little bit about labor laws. But with the Progressive Agriculture Safety Day program, if you didn't hear of us previously, we are a program that is designed specifically for children, predominantly between the ages of 4 and 13. So we kind of get children around the elementary school age. Our goal with our program is to have children participate in hands-on activities that really reinforce safety and health so that they will make safer and healthier decisions. And then not only that, but they'll go home and then they'll become those safety advocates and in a sense train the trainer. They'll go home and teach mom and dad about safety, grandma and grandpa about safety, their siblings. So, we want to change some of those behaviors early instead of, just doing maybe things unsafely as it's been done for generation to generation. We want to keep this next generation safe. So our program is all throughout North America. We're very strong within communities and schools. You can kind of see our presence here on the map. All those red dots indicate where an application has been received for 2024. We actually have the most applications received ever in our program's 30-year history this year. So if you don't see a red dot in your area, let us know. We can help you get one there. Or if you do see one, we can also kind of connect you if that's something you want to volunteer with. But we have topics on over 30 different safety and health related topics. So we have the curriculum, which really walks you through how to teach kids about safety. And I'll just quickly mention, we have 4 unique delivery modes now. I mentioned earlier, school and community, that's really where we got our start. So you can have a school-based program. These are offered year-round. We're gearing up for the busy fall season when kids get back to school, but a lot of these are recognized as a specific school event, like a field trip. They're either on campus or sometimes bused to a farm, a fairgrounds, a park. But this is our most popular delivery mode, and usually you're targeting a specific grade or grade. We have community-based, which are also wonderful. These again happen predominantly we see during the summer months when kids are out of school. Sometimes we're educating multiple ages, and sometimes even the entire family are coming through to learn about safety. Sometimes they're with their children or they're separate stations for adults versus the children. One of the newer ones is classroom-based. This was introduced right after COVID. So we know there were some limitations on kids leaving the classroom and sometimes limitations on resources that our communities have. They didn't have the volunteer support like they used to, or the financial support to bus the kids. So you could go right into the classroom and teach on safety, and we provide you a resource kit to be able to do that. And then last but certainly not least, real quickly, Safety Zone. This is the newest one that we rolled out this year. If you don't, again, want to have a full-blown safety day, be on your own, you can actually bring a piece of safety to an event that's already happening. So you're in conjunction with maybe a fair, a farm show, a national night out where we're talking about safety and health. And these are very, what I want to say, a shorter, sweeter version, like segments, condensed segments of our safety program. So at most of our safety days, the sessions are about 15 to 20 minutes on each safety and health topic. We don't want to, again, we want to keep those kids' attention, but we know at a safety zone, it needs to be even shorter, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, because we're also competing with other activities and also other vendors at that event. So if this is something that you're interested in maybe exploring more, toward the end of the presentation, we will have kind of a QR code where you can link or find out a little bit more.
Thank you, Jana, very much. We're going close to the end here, so I'm going to be pretty quick. The youth labor laws in the U.S., they follow the Fair Labor Standards Act. There are 2 bulletins that the U.S. government has released, Child Labor Bulletin 101 and 102. 101 focuses on child labor in general. 102 is focused just on agriculture. Those are kind of very nice documents to get a read and get a sense of what is allowed or versus not. Remember, this is at the federal level. State laws could have regulations that are stricter than what's already at federal, and in that case, the state laws would be enforced. These child labor bulletins, they cover at what age you can work, the type of work you can do, the number of hours, when in terms of school hours, what is the minimum age, and so on. And agriculture tends to be, in general, exempt from most of the U.S. regulations. So I'll show you a quick example here. So for non-agriculture, non-families, at each different age level, there's limited amount of work. and limited and restricted hours. They can work only outside of school hours, for example, all the way until they're age 16. When it comes to agriculture for a non-family member, so an employee, they can work as young as aged younger than 12 with parent consent on small farms, as long as it's outside of school hours. And then this is kind of switches that by 16, 17, they can do any work, unlimited hours, and so on. When it comes to agriculture, where your family, so you're working for a youth is working for their parents, there are no regulations at any age group. They can do any work at any time, even during school hours, for unlimited hours. There's also another set of prohibitions by HOOA, so hazard occupations. And these are 11 items that basically is restricted. And this is, we collected this from Gearing Up for Safety by Purdue University. So the law requires that tractors over 20 PTO HP, they are not allowed to operate if they're under the age of 16. Similarly to operating PTO operated machinery, operating specialized powered machinery, working with breeding livestock, working in wood lots with logs over 6 inches of diameter. They're not allowed to do it if they're under the age of 16. Working on ladders and scaffolds at height over 20 feet. So that includes basically grain bins, going up a grain bin. Operating transport vehicles, passengers, or riding on a tractor as a passenger. Working inside toxic atmospheres, including confined spaces. Handling or applying restricted chemicals. And then handling and using blasting agents. And lastly, transporting, transferring, applying anhydrous ammonia. And I could give more examples for each one, but we're running close in time, so we can include it in resources. There are exemptions and limitations. So again, as I mentioned, family farms are exempted from following this regulation. So as long as a parent is hiring their own kids, they are exempted. Though we recommend that they look at other sources, kind of like Cultivate Safety, to see what can a child do safely. Generally, youth ages 14 and 15 can get exemptions regarding tractors and farm equipment limitations, as long as they complete and get certified by some sort of training program. This is generally managed either by 4-H extension programs or at high school itself. Also, there is an exemption if the hazardous activity is related to the training and short duration as well. So I'm going to end here. Thank you guys all for coming. We have a next set of wonderful talks. So in September, we're going to address mental stress. October, we're going to talk about resources for farmers in crisis. So you've experienced some sort of injury and so on. We're also going to talk about the future of ag safety in November. Thank you to all our sponsors for helping us here. Thank you to educational partners as well. Thank you for joining us. It's been a full hour, and I hope you really appreciate the content. Please do submit your questions as I'm just sharing with you the resources at the end. You could check our website at publish.illinois.edu/agricultural safety. That's where I talk about my research areas and the programs I'm doing currently. You could also go to Extension and search for Extension Farm Safety at Illinois to see all the events that we're currently hosting. So all of the presentations I mentioned earlier, you could see them there. They are upcoming. And lastly, if you're interested in Progressive Ag Foundation Safety Days or Safety Zones, hey, please just complete this brief online interest form, and I know Jana will connect you right up. Is there any questions for Jana or myself? And Jana, thank you very much for presenting. You can also, by the way, put in any comments. And Jana, do you have any comments yourself that you wanted to talk about as we're closing up?
Yeah, I just wanted to again thank you for having me and being able to talk through this important topic on keeping our children safe on farms and rural communities. And again, just as we're gearing up for this busy time of year, whether we're just sending our kiddos back to school or gearing up for the fall harvest season, again, it's just very important to keep safety at the forefront. It really does start with you and me and us being very good role models for our children. So practicing what we preach and always wearing our PPE in front of our children to encourage them to do the same.
Well, we're at the hour, so I'm going to thank you guys all, and we're going to end the webinar. Thank you, everybody.